The voicemail came in at exactly 2:13 a.m. At first, nobody thought it meant anything. The message lasted only 11 seconds, just the sound of heavy, ragged breathing. Then, a desperate whisper, warning that if anything ever happened to her, it was him. By sunrise, Emily Harper had vanished. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no goodbye note left behind. Just an untouched, lukewarm cup of coffee sitting on her kitchen counter, and her phone abandoned on the dining table. For nearly 2 years, everyone in Emily's life believed she had finally found the perfect man. Daniel Reed was calm, intelligent, highly successful, and strangely adept at understanding people. He remembered the tiniest details from casual conversations and always knew exactly what to say. Friends described him as deeply empathetic and emotionally mature. He was the kind of man people trusted instinctively, without hesitation. But 3 weeks after Emily disappeared, detectives uncovered hidden recordings deep inside Daniel's basement. Private conversations, phone calls, private arguments, even intimate moments Emily never knew were being recorded. Suddenly, the investigation took a much darker turn, leaving detectives to ask one terrifying question. How well do we actually know the people we fall in love with? If psychological cases like this disturb you, yet fascinate you, take a second to hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into real-life inspired stories that expose the hidden dark side of human nature, the things most people never see coming until it's too late. Join us and never miss an episode. 6 months earlier, Emily wasn't looking for a relationship. At 48 years old, she had already survived a painful, exhausting divorce. Her children had grown up and moved out, and every evening in her house felt painfully quiet. Then, Daniel appeared. They met through a dating app, and his very first message immediately caught her attention. He told her that she looked like someone who was tired of fake people. Emily laughed when she read it because, somehow, he was exactly right. Their conversations moved with dizzying speed. Within days, Daniel already seemed to know her favorite music, her fondest childhood memories, her deepest fears, and her sharpest insecurities. And strangely, he seemed to share every single one of them. For the first time in years, Emily felt truly seen. She felt understood. What she didn't realize was that some people don't build emotional connections naturally. They study them. Psychologists call it mirroring. It is a highly calculated manipulation tactic where a predator reflects your own personality, values, and traumas back at you to create an illusion of artificial intimacy. To the victim, it feels like destiny. To the manipulator, it is merely a strategy. But in the beginning, Daniel didn't look dangerous. He looked perfect. There were flowers, constant phone calls, and sweet messages waiting for her every morning. Emily's friends envied the relationship. After years of disappointment, she finally looked genuinely happy again. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, small things started to shift. Daniel hated it when she didn't reply to his messages immediately. At first, it sounded completely harmless. He claimed he was just worried about her safety. But eventually, the text became more intense. He began questioning why she took too long to answer, tracking her response times. Every concern he voiced sounded perfectly reasonable. That is what made it so dangerous. Because manipulation rarely begins with overt control, it begins with guilt. 3 months into the relationship, Emily noticed Daniel becoming strangely observant, too observant. He knew where she had been before she even told him. He remembered the exact times she left work and referenced casual conversations she barely remembered having. At first, she convinced herself it just meant he cared deeply. Until one night, the illusion shattered. Emily was cooking dinner when her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A text message appeared on the screen, telling her she needed to leave Daniel before it became impossible. Emily froze. Moments later, another message arrived, revealing that the sender was an ex-girlfriend who had dated Daniel before her. Over the next hour, a flood of messages poured in. Claims about extreme manipulation, obsessive behavior, secret recordings. Emily wanted to believe it was fake. She told ourselves it was just an angry ex, jealousy, or pointless drama. But then came the final message. It was a photograph showing Daniel standing outside a house late at night, watching silently through a window. That night, Emily barely slept, and for the first time, she started noticing the warning signs she had previously ignored. why Daniel always subtly demanded her passwords, why he became visibly irritated whenever she wanted to spend time alone, why every single disagreement they had somehow ended up being her fault. The next morning, Emily searched Daniel's name deep online. Buried beneath years of public records, she found restraining orders. 2 of them, both contained nearly identical accusations: surveillance, obsessive stalking, and emotional intimidation. Terrified, Emily immediately confronted him. But Daniel's response remained perfectly calm. There was no anger, no panic, just absolute control. He smoothly claimed that his exes were unstable and insisted that people say terrible things out of spite after a breakup. Then, he looked into her eyes and asked a simple, heavy question. Did she trust him? And somehow, after everything she had discovered, Emily found herself apologizing to him. That is precisely how emotional abuse works. It doesn't rely on fear at first. It relies on emotional pressure, making the victim feel guilty for even doubting the person who is hurting them. But deep down, something no longer felt right. Over the next week, Emily quietly started paying closer attention, and what she discovered terrified her to her core. Daniel had access to photos she had never sent him. He referenced specific places she had visited entirely without him. Then came the moment she could no longer explain away. Emily returned home early from work one afternoon. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there, but as she stepped inside, she heard faint movement downstairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she walked carefully toward the basement door. The light was on. Daniel was standing beside a utility shelf filled with storage boxes. He smiled immediately, too quickly. Then, Emily noticed the wires running behind the shelves. Small, blinking lights, cameras, hidden carefully between everyday objects, watching, recording. Her entire body froze. Daniel calmly claimed the cameras were just for home security, but Emily knew that was a lie, because some of those cameras were pointed directly at places no one would ever put a security system: the dining room, the hallway, even the entrance to her bedroom. That night, Emily secretly packed a bag. For the first time, she began considering a way out. The next evening, Daniel asked to meet her one last time, a public place. Just dinner to talk things through. Emily agreed. At 9:14 p.m., security cameras captured her entering a roadside diner. At 11:43 p.m., her phone stopped responding forever. And after that, Emily Harper vanished into thin air. The police immediately focused their investigation on Daniel, but proving psychological abuse and coercive control is incredibly difficult, especially when the suspect appears calm, highly intelligent, and entirely cooperative. During questioning, Daniel remained completely composed. He coolly insisted that couples argue all the time, and that arguments do not make someone a criminal. With no body, no crime scene, and no physical evidence of violence, the case stalled. But when investigators executed a search warrant on Daniel's home, they uncovered his true secret life. Hundreds of digital recordings, folders meticulously labeled with different women's names, detailed psychological notes charting their likes, dislikes, fears, and emotional weaknesses. They weren't just mementos, they were behavioral profiles. The deeper the investigators looked, the darker the picture became. But the biggest shock of the entire case came 2 weeks later. Emily Harper was still alive. She had disappeared intentionally. The moment she discovered those hidden cameras, Emily had secretly contacted a specialized domestic abuse network and law enforcement advocates. Together, they helped her stage a disappearance and vanish into a safe house before Daniel's obsessive behavior could escalate into physical violence. Shortly after she was found safe, investigators uncovered one final, chilling recording from Daniel's collection. In it, Daniel's voice sounded entirely cold and devoid of emotion as he quietly muttered to himself, "Nobody leaves me first." A heavy silence filled the room as the detectives listened to it, because suddenly, everything made sense. This was never love. It was possession disguised as intimacy. Daniel Reed was eventually arrested and charged with felony stalking, illegal surveillance, and coercive control. But perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire case was that Daniel never once looked like a monster. There was no screaming, no public threats, and no violence that people could easily see. There was only charm, patience, and a deep understanding of human vulnerability. That is what made him truly terrifying, because the most dangerous manipulators rarely appear broken. They appear safe. And sometimes, by the time the warning signs finally become obvious, the emotional trap has already snapped shut. This case is a chilling reminder of how easily wolves can hide in sheep's clothing. If Emily's story kept you on the edge of your seat, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.